Greetings, students, knights, and staff of the Jedi Praxeum. We're once again at Wednesday, and tonight we're going to discuss a little bit about last week and discuss a little bit about this week. Last week we had what was called the Forceworks Study Hall. It turned out to be a fantastic experience, and I want to very plainly thank everyone for their interaction and contributions to the lesson. There were many perspectives shown and much learning to be had by all. I don't typically put the interactive aspect in the guides, but with this lesson, because of what it was, I did make sure to include the major interactive aspects, the impactful messaging. I rearranged them a bit because you know how chat works. You got people talking to different people in rows, and so I grouped it all together. So anyone that has not had a chance to look through that guide, you really should. It's a very insightful experience. At the end of Sunday, I gave everybody a warning as to what this next class is going to be. I don't typically do that. I typically just create it and people show up. This next course is going to be on the shadow. Now, the phrase shadow work has become a bit of a buzzword within various occult and esoteric communities. Pagan, neo-pagan, psychic, New Age, doesn't matter. The concept of shadow work is to refine the yang that is in each of us in comparison to the yin, or refine the yin that is in comparison to the yang. As I've mentioned before, while these two words, they do mean things within their origin, they are pretty much exponents. They are X and Y. They mean whatever you associate to them in that instant. They are complementary opposites. If you make yin the dark of yourself, your shadow, then yang is your light, the light that you give off, your goodness. So why? Why as Jedi do we need to work with our shadow? It's pretty much so that we can learn to control that part of ourselves. We have to be able to see both sides at all times, or we will never truly gain the control of ourselves enough to really do a lot of good, especially when it comes to interaction in the Force. If all we ever focus on is the happy, fluffy goodness, the second that you interact with someone that just radiates nastiness, radiates this darkness, whether they're doing it on purpose or not, or a situation that is mired by this ick, and there's no better word for it. It's just ick. When you run into this spiritual sludge, if you've never dealt with it within yourself, you won't know how to deal with it around you or with someone else. Now, many of the ones watching this have previous esoteric training, so they will have had some exposure to the idea of shadow work. So the shadow, as the Jedi erroneously called it in the earliest days of our community, the dark side. There's no side. There's no side of the Force. The Force is. There's no side of you. You do not have a dark side and a light side unless you have like a multiple personality situation, and then that is something far beyond the scope of this video message. But we don't have sides. We have situations. We have scars. Our shadow is made of our scars. Every pain, every scar, every letdown, every insult, every belittlement, they all have been fed into this shadow. Now the shadow's easy because the shadow is nature. We learn from the first instant that selfishness and theatricality tied to that get us what we want. That's what a baby does when it cries. It's innocent, but it is still very much me, wah, wah, wah. And so the shadow begins there, because that's the base of what we typically call within the path the negative sense of the ego. I don't like using the word ego. Ego comes with a really bad undertone that it shouldn't have. Your ego is your sense of self. It's your ability to say, I. It is your subjective experience of an objective world. It is your perspective. If you did not have any ego, you would not have preferences, you would not have a sense of right and wrong, you would not have morals, and thus you would not have any reason to ever act on anything, good, bad, or indifferent. You wouldn't even be selfish, because you would have no sense of self. The shadow is the greed, it's the pain, it's the anger, it's the lust and the malice. There was a thing going on in the main chat earlier, it'll be yesterday when you see this video, about how the Jedi in the Old Republic, the prequel Jedi, the statement was against mourning. Mourn them do not. Miss them do not. It's very flippant. And I'm not really going to pick on that particular line, but I'm going to pick on that particular little gremlin. Because the first thing you hear him say in these prequels that has any impact is fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and hate leads to suffering. At no point does fear lead to evil. The big dark, the big nasty, massive, intentional destruction and imbalance of the Bogan. At no point does pain lead to the Bogan. At no point does suffering lead to the Bogan. But it gives the shadow fuel to bring about the Bogan. Now, a shadow in and of itself is a state of imbalance, because the shadow rejects all aspects of the light. The inner light, the yin to yang light. It rejects it. It's very closed off and self-absorbed and angry. For the most part. There are cases where parts of your shadow are very outwardly expressed. But we're speaking in generalities because I'm making a video, not writing a book. We will get further into the specifics of that this weekend, though. The reason I'm bringing it up now is that the Jedi path tends to call to damaged people. That's why I'm here. I was drawn to the path as a way to find power in an abusive home as a teenager. It's the same thing that drove me to the pursuit of excellence in the martial arts. Finding control, finding power. And my martial arts were very much my shadow for a while. I have no shame in telling you that the reason I trained as hard as I did was to kill the man that I was living with, my dad, because I was being abused by him pretty regularly, like at least 3 times a week. My training was not very wholesome. It was very selfish. It was caused by suffering. My suffering by the hands of another person pushed me towards this point of imbalance, this point of budding Bogan. Never had to happen, thankfully. In fact, while you're watching this video, I will very likely be helping him install a new fish tank. because he likes to install them in the walls like living pictures. Whatever. He has changed. He has gotten control of his shadow. And when I moved out at 18, I went through a lot to get control over mine, because I had had to feed it from 13 to 18, non-stop, just to survive. I tell that story not to go, look at me, I'm the big bad boogeyman, or to go, look at how far I have come, I have ascended. No. The shadow has a benefit. It has its use. Someone mentioned to me that I was putting a bunch of focus on my martial experiences in this course, which I think is ironic, since my previous course was labeled the dojo, because it drew on a lot of martial experiences also. But the martial training that I went through helped me to harness and hone my shadow. It helped me to find balance between the shadow and the goodness, between the yin and the yang, so that I could fall into a state of ever-shifting, because true balance is death, ever-shifting dynamic harmony, almost as much as balance, which brings about the Ashla, the light of the Jedi. Jedi are light bringers. We bring balance, we bring Ashla, we bring harmony. We don't always bring happy, but we always bring right, because that is what the Force does. Ashla is the balance, it is righting itself. It may not always be subjectively fair, and a lot of times it's not. And that's a really horrible thing to say, because we don't stand around and move the universe in our hands like a puppet. We interact with each individual subjective experience, every life form within the Force. So the fact that the balance is objectively fair, but subjectively not always, it's a sticking point. And it tends to create things like the shadow. The abuses I went through as a child taught me strength, taught me control, taught me a sense of maturity and a sense of focus that at that point I did not have. I have some bumps, some bruises, and some scars from it, but by and large, I did benefit from it in the end. So the point of the shadow is not to run from it. It's not your dark side, but it is what people say is the dark side. When we go back to our first lesson on the Force, Bogan and Ashla, the big light and big dark. The way they are used in the original mythos, they don't say light, they say the good. I bring him back to the good. There's still good in him. By the rules of complementary opposites. That makes the dark, as it is expressed, big capital D dark. The opposite of good, which by definition is evil. Lesser evil, greater evil. Those are semantic things that are very difficult to get into in such a short media as this. So again, I use the terms Ashla and Bogan. Ashla is the good, and Bogan is the not good. The bad, the nasty, the evil, pained, the destroyed. The shadow. That's all inside. It's part of the balance of the ashla. We all have our history. We all have our damages. We all have our scars. And we all have shadows. Again, some of you have gone through shadow work, some have not. And I'm going to warn you, this lesson, this Sunday, I'm going to give you a couple of exercises that you're going to need to go through, not over just the week, but for the remainder of the course, because they're going to take time and they are going to be uncomfortable. You're going to be digging up pain, digging out that infected tooth that's just caused you pain for years and years, you know? Digging out the tumor that is slowly killing you from the inside. And there's no promise that anything's going to get fixed in a couple of weeks. Excuse. Absolutely no promises that it's going to fix anything in a couple of weeks. But none of what I have been teaching is supposed to work in a couple of weeks. Everything is something you should be putting in a notebook for the rest of your life. The path is not a 12-week study course. I have related the path to a trade school, to a friend recently. I say that because I went through a trade school for my job, and we went 6 weeks of basic theory, okay, and then 3 weeks of measuring tools, and 3 weeks of engine components, and 3 weeks of electrical components, and then 3 weeks of this, and 3 weeks of that, and 3 weeks of this, and 3 weeks of that, and you got tested on all of it, and you moved on. And then you went in 3 weeks of this, and that, and this, and this, and that. And if it wasn't for the massive amount of notes that we were given, we didn't have to take these. They were printed out, we put them in a notebook, and we worked through the day. Most of the time, you didn't even open that notebook. Teacher went over stuff while you were doing it, and sometimes there were diagrams you had to open a book for. But I've got 6 4-inch 3-ring binders in a box from 16 months of school. It's a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of notes, and I have used them because this trade school gives the basics, the bare bones basics for my job. That's what this training does. This training gives you the bare bone basics for the path. It's not something that you're going to get in 3 months. It's not something you're going to get in 6 months. It's not something you're going to get in a year. You won't, and that's fine. This course is not meant to take someone that has absolutely no experience and then pump out a brand new Jedi Knight. As mentioned at the beginning, the Knight part is relatively easy after you teach someone to be Jedi. That's the hard part. That's what this course is. And that's why we're going to delve into the nasty, murky bog that is the shadow. But none of this is supposed to be a do it and let it go kind of thing. You may eventually let some of this go, and that's fine. There may be individual little points of it that you let go right now. That's okay too. But by and large, this is not something that you should be just going, that was fun, and then setting it down. The exercises that are given, the introspections that are given, the discussions that we have, those are important. One of the most influential pieces of the mythos during my training was a book by Michael A. Stackpole called I, Jedi. It's a very human look at the training of a Jedi from the perspective of a fighter pilot Cobb that didn't have the power to flip over cars. The main character had absolutely no telekinetic skill at all. He was the most normal Jedi there was until Rogue One came about, and then they gave us Chirrut, whose character isn't even Jedi. The character's name is Corran Horn. He is a fantastic example of how to use this path within certain other confines. Like I said, he was a cop. His grandfather, a Jedi Master, also a cop. This was a point within the mythos before the prequels where you were a Jedi or nothing. It wasn't until you were sent off to go do something and then you went and did something. You were given orders and then you came back to the temple and then you were given more orders. That's the way the prequel set it up. But before that, this guy's grandfather character, Nisha, he was a member of a police force on his home planet and a Jedi Master. Anyway, I bring that up because I bought this book in hardback and I had it for several years, and then I got a chance to get it signed by Michael Stackpole, and it was awesome. I went to this convention that I saw he was going to be at specifically just to get him to sign this book. He signed it for free, and I still have it. But this hardback copy is taped together because I've read it so many times. I cannot tell you how many times I've read this book because I don't know. But the reason I'm bringing it up is because every time I read it, my perspective is shifted from the last time. And so I look at the events from a slightly different angle. It's been probably 2 years since I've read it now, though. And I probably will go read it again after this course when I have some time. I've got a book of to-be-reads, a stack of them. They're getting to be pretty good. But it's not the point. I will reread this book, probably by the end of this course. And I'm guaranteed that my perspective is going to be different. I'm guaranteed that I will not like the character of Luke in it because he's a very self-absorbed new teacher. He doesn't know any better. And he's just kind of floundering, but he's very preachy in his floundering. And I don't care for that. Much like the way they presented him in the Book of Boba Fett, he was very preachy in his floundering, and I don't care for that. It shows a lack of humility. It shows that he's wearing all black for a reason, because he's still dangling on the edge of his shadow, of his need to be known and understood and respected when he says something. I'm a Jedi, like my father before me. That's the tone he takes. And so, getting off of that tangent, the reason I bring up the book is because this training, we keep them up in the guide section for a reason, so that you don't have to sift through a chat for hours to try and glean some information. We take the lessons and we put them up so that everybody can copy them down into a file, take screenshots of very specific parts, whatever you want to do. But remember that this training is something that will be with you for the rest of your life. If it was me, and I know because I've already done this, I would go through the guides and I would copy every written lesson into one file, and I'd label it Praxeum. And it grows with every lesson. It grows with every week. It's got Karen's course in it. It's got my whole first course, this course up to this point, and Lee's entire second course. His first course did not get recorded because of situations that were happening, and that's fine. So, and all of the standalone lessons. Like Tao's got a good one on, accountability. Yeah, that's what it was, 10 points of accountability. Charles did a really good one on visualizations. Kent did a very good one on staying in the flow, more open for longer periods of time. That's all there. Everything that is written down is in this file. You should all do that too, because this isn't going to go away just because you get done with the course. It's not going to stay in your brain all the time either. It's just not. And that's the reason that I say that this shadow work is something you're going to need to work on for the remainder of the course. And there's still no guarantee it's going to do any good right away. It is something you're going to need to work on for the rest of your life, because until you die, your shadow will continue to change and grow. So, take the lessons to heart. I'm not going to be able to give you every technique for shadow work. I can't do the deep the deep hypnotic meditations. I can't do the deep self-hypnosis ones, not in the media and the time frame that we have. But you are more than welcome to go find those. I'd recommend waiting until after the course, because you already have plenty of homework to do. But if you have a lot of free time and you want to dive into it, that's fine. If you have any questions, please reach out. I am more than welcome, more than willing to answer questions. So, with that, I leave you for the night. I'm going to post a picture in the thread beneath this that is going to be the absolute definition of what the shadow is and how it interacts with us. It's going to be the scene from an episode of Samurai Jack. Great old cartoon. It's an episode called Mad Jack. In this episode, he is being hunted by robot after robot after robot. And the first 5 minutes of the episode is him just mercilessly destroying all these bounty hunting robots that are trying to kill him. He can't take a breath without something trying to kill him. And after he gets and blows up all these machines, he takes a deep breath, he fixes his hair, because one little strand's come loose. He fixes his hair, and he takes a step, and the strap on his sandal breaks. And that's just the last straw. He's screaming and losing it, and he picks up his sandal, and he throws it at a tree. And this tree has a wanted poster of his face on it. And through a mixture of technology and Aku's evil magic, the big bad guy in that show, Mad Jack is generated. It's the same exact everything, except he's in black and red instead of white and silver. Every move is the same. Every strength is the same. Every weakness is the same. He is fighting himself for the remainder of this episode. And the mad version almost wins. But then he understands the concept of his shadow, and that he is the same as his shadow, and thus he regains control. And the shadow disappears at that point from the conflict, not from him, because it makes an appearance again in season 5 when he's in that last season. That last season's a bit messy, but his shadow comes up there too, but it's not the same way. It's not the same image. So I'm going to leave an image of Samurai Jack fighting his shadow, physically fighting his shadow in his own mind. Because at the end of the episode, he realizes the fight never happened. There was nothing to fight except himself. That's where the shadow will come up for everybody at some point. You will have what is known as a dark night of the soul. And that could be a lot longer than a night. That could be a whole month. It could be a quarter. It could be a year. Mine was about 3 to 4 weeks long. Almost a whole month. My most recent one. That statement's very important to remember also, because you will get more than one. You'll get them for the rest of your life. As long as you try to do better, you will be faced with what is keeping you from doing better. So, I'm done rambling. Force guided.